addiction recovery doesn't happen by accident, and I'm going to give you some steps on how to make it happen on purpose so we can have sustainable recovery. So my name's Ashley Bloxham. If you're new to the channel, I'm a therapist. I specialise in addiction. I also specialise in childhood and trauma. I've overcame addiction, which I think is the most important thing to qualify as to be speaking, and I've studied it right up to PhD, and I know what it's like to have a loved one who's struggling. So I've just done this and it went wrong, so I'm going to try it again. So addiction recovery doesn't happen by accident, and it's a big thing where something that we struggle with in addiction recovery is this idea of I'm never going to do the thing again. I'm never going to be participating in drugs or alcohol or porn or whatever it is. That feels so overwhelming. So then what we do, a lot of people, is we'd say one day at a time. You always hear that in recovery. But the issue with one day at a time is it's got no structure and plan. And the truth of the matter is a lot of people don't make it past the first year of addiction recovery. So what can be really helpful is to do something in the middle. So instead of thinking I'm never going to do the thing again, instead think of what would my life look like if I never did the thing again. And then try and do one day at a time to get toward that. So if we're going to be looking at what your life looks like without addiction, we need to go back to the beginning. Why did I have the addiction in the first place? So maybe it's you started taking drugs with your friends and it helped you feel more confident in social settings. Or maybe you just learned that I can only get wrecked with my friends, so you're no longer confident in social settings. So then we need to look at, okay, if I was living a life addiction-free, then I need to learn how to be confident in social settings. And then that's where we can bring it back to one day at a time. Maybe it's the fact that you had childhood trauma and it helps you just deal with the fact that your nervous system is shot to death. You're in constant fight or flight. So again, your life without the addiction looks like having a relaxed nervous system. Emotional regulation. So again, bring it back to that one day at a time. How can I achieve that? And it's really important that this one day at a time has a plan. What are you going to do instead? How are you going to get to there? Not just floating through the addiction recovery one day at a time, hoping that you make it to the next day, because that's what it feels like. And that isn't that great for building confidence either. Just the same way that never doing it also isn't great for confidence. Hi, yeah, it's so Sean is saying seems like you took good care of it. I think you're talking about my sound. I had a sound issue, technical difficulties, but we're back. So if we're thinking about how are we gonna get to addiction recovery and strategize toward it, one thing can be looking at, okay, what in my life is in alignment with addiction, and really look at changing it. So one of the things that a lot of people in addiction recovery struggle with is the fact that maybe they've got friendships which were built on a buzz, or maybe they only socialise with a drink, or maybe they associate going to bed with doom scrolling or gambling. Maybe you have habits of watching porn all the time. So we need to look at what is not in alignment with the addiction-free life, and that's a good place to start. And even if you don't want to stop the addiction just yet, because again, we need to be realistic about our recovery, we can start to make changes so that when we do stop, we're in a better stead. So if all your friendships are built on a buzz, maybe go find some friendships which aren't. Or you could maybe look at switching up what you do with your friends. So I had a friend who I used to take coke with all the time. Instead, we started doing yoga. So we started changing the dynamic of our friendships. But I will keep going back to this. I'll see what people are saying. I don't know what your name is. I'm just going to call you IB. Hi, I'm new here. Hello, how are you doing? So I'm a therapist for anyone who's new. And if you've got any questions around addiction or mental health, I'm happy to answer them. Happy New Year, by the way. Guy said, if anyone wants some support, please visit my website, School of Addiction, or comment on my videos. Thank you, Guy. And how are you doing, Guy? It's nice to see you again. I say see your little name on my screen. Carlos is saying, hello, how are you? You're a beauty, light and strength. Thank you. Never abandon your dreams. May your happiness become routine and may you be a very happy woman. That is very lovely. Yeah, this is one of the other things as well. So when we're in addiction, we kind of let go of all our dreams and aspirations, or maybe we have them, but we put them on the back burner. And instead, the main dream and aspiration we have is to do the thing again. For me, my main dream and aspiration was to get Ket and get as much of it as possible for as cheap as possible. And that is a good thing when we're thinking about, okay, what does my life look when I'm not an addict? Maybe it's about thinking about what are my dreams and aspirations. Let's pick them up again. If we don't have any, let's go to the drawing board and think about, okay, what would I like to do with my life? And a good way to do this, again, is to go forward and back. So we can go forward and we can think about, okay, if I was sitting on my deathbed, what would I have been happy to have achieved in my life? What would something that I would have loved to do? Maybe that's being a parent, being in a happy relationship, starting a business, going back to uni, whatever it is. And also go back. So if you're still not sure what it is, go to your childhood and think about, okay, what used to bring us joy when there was no expectations in life? So what did I used to enjoy doing when I was a kid? Maybe it was dancing. So maybe you do a dance class or something. Right, let's see what other people are saying. Eyebrow is saying how to get over anger issues. That is a really good question. I used to really struggle with emotional dysregulation. So if we've got anger, the first thing you need to do is regulate yourself. With any kind of emotional dysregulation, we need to regulate. So that looks like, right, so if we think about what is anger. So anger is fight or flight. It's just the fight side of fight or flight. So we're getting ready to fight. And realistically, we don't need to be fighting our co-workers or our kids or our partners. So it's really good to, first of all, remember I'm in fight or flight. And with fight or flight, what happens is it's our body starts to accelerate, because realistically, fight or flight is supposed to protect us from predators or perceived threats, not from our children kicking off in the morning because they don't want to wear their shoes, or our partner's being annoying, or whatever it is. So we need to remember that, okay, our body's accelerators are on, let's hit the brakes. And that looks like taking some deep breaths, and it's breathing out longer than what you're breathing in. So think about, I'm going to do a sigh. So like, and just do that a few times, calm yourself down, say the words in your head or out loud, I am in fight or flight. And then say, I am in control of the situation. So this was something I learned by someone called Gillian Fortune. She said, I am in control. And then from there, decide if you need to take some extra time to chill out, because taking some time away from the situation, if you need it, is going to make the outcome better. And then just think about logically what would be helpful. So in fight or flight, we are acting from our limbic system, which is our emotions. And what we need to do is engage our prefrontal cortex, which is rational thinking. So then you'll be approaching the situation with emotion and rational thinking and a regulated nervous system. And that means you're going to have a much better outcome for you and the other person. So yeah, so think, calm your nervous system, bring on your rational thinking online, take some space if needed, come back to it. So yeah, hope that was helpful. I just want to say hi to everybody who said hello as well. I noticed a lot of people have said hi. I was talking about luxurious hair. Thank you. I have been blessed with hair. I'm not gonna downplay it. Very lucky. Friend you took what with? Real nice. I don't know what you mean there. Could you elaborate, please? Hi, Wilco. How you doing? Right, let's see if this got some questions. It's okay. I'm snowing here and it's cold and happy. Yeah, it's snowing here as well. Bloody freezing. Right, how to deal. So Mid Sneak is saying how to deal with Adderall withdrawal. Constantly feel like it's necessary to take it just to get out of the habit. Yeah. So Adderall, is that the ADHD med? Could you just answer that first? Because I just want to double check. Because basically withdrawal from prescription meds needs to be careful with them. So yeah, answer that and then I'll go back to it. So Adam saying, we don't have anything to compare life with. How can we have any expectations? Yeah, that's the thing. We don't have anything to compare life to when you're a kid. And when you look at children, they're just doing life and they don't care. So my son doesn't care what people think about him being silly. So the older he's getting, the more he's starting to care. So sometimes if we're not really sure what we want, what brings us joy, it's good to go back to when we were kids and think, what did we naturally enjoy when we didn't care what our friends thought and we didn't think that we had to do something. So going back to when you were a child can be helpful. So I used to teach my teddies, and that was really helpful in knowing what do I want to do in life. I used to love dancing, so I do dancing. So, like, it's a good place to start if we're not sure. Mid Sneak, Chris, take twice the recommended dose and good luck stopping. I wouldn't say that was good advice. Thanks for whoever's liking me live, by the way. Wilco saying, one of my biggest goals was 3 days. You have to celebrate the win. Now clean 23 days. Yes. Yeah, and 3 days is a good goal to have. So if you're sitting in addiction recovery, a good rule of thumb to remember is milestones, because you feel like what you're feeling now is never going to end. But actually, addiction recovery tends to have a similar structure. So your first 3 days are the roughest physically. That'll start to ease down. But your first 3 weeks are going to be the roughest mentally. And then you start to feel a little bit better, like you start to have a little sparkle in life. So again, thinking, okay, I've just got to get to the 3 weeks is the next point. And then after 3 months, you'll start to notice that your craving should start to simmer down. So then it's like 3 months. So the intensity of the cravings will start to calm down and the frequency of it. So 3-3-3 is always good. But yeah, good advice. Just have little mini goals, things that you can actually achieve is so helpful in addiction recovery, but having goals. Sometimes we don't have goals and that can feel a bit demoralizing as well. And another way for goals can be good is if anyone uses the I Am Sober app, or my friend uses a different version of it, but basically where you can count up how many days you're on, that can be helpful. And on the I Am Sober app, it starts to tell you different changes that you'll have. So like things that you should be experiencing. So again, you can start and notice the wins, like, oh, I'm actually feeling a little bit different and I've managed to rack up X amount of days. If the person with the Adderall is still on, will you let us know, by the way, about, is that ADHD meds? Right, CTG is saying, what about the theory that for men who have high testosterone levels get addicted, but once it goes down, then they lose interest in whatever it was that caused their addiction? Never heard that before. I've not seen the research on that. It'd be interesting to see what the interplay between testosterone and addiction, because men are typically more likely to be addicted than women. It might have something to do with dopamine as well, because people with ADHD, I wonder if there's something to do with men and dopamine as well. Because I know dopamine, I definitely know in relationships, dopamine plays more of a role with men than women. I'm going to look into that. It's quite interesting, because I like looking into the neuroscience around addiction. But the thing is, so thinking about that from what I do know from the angle of addiction, because I don't know the answer to that. If anybody does know about the interaction between testosterone and addiction, do let us know. But the thing that you've said there about when you lose interest in whatever caused the addiction, So the thing is, what I would say is if you can change your life, then you're less likely to lose the appeal of addiction. Addiction's less likely to be appealing. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden you don't do it, because we've got to retrain our brain chemistry. Our brains are now reliant on whatever the addiction is. But if we change our life, then we're more likely to be able to let go of the addiction. So the reason why I'm talking about that in terms of testosterone is, if it's to do with testosterone, which I don't know, if you do something where you can get that testosterone out in a healthy way, then it's going to be easier to let go of the addiction. So, for example, martial arts, going to the gym, sport, just any kind of healthy thing where you're getting your testosterone out. Anything which is like group camaraderie for men. And this is the thing, like, if you look at not necessarily addiction, but research on men, what it shows is men used to be a lot more together. There used to be like group mentality. So women still get together and natter and gossip. Men used to get together and do things. So that's one thing that I think in the 21st century is lacking a little bit. You just don't get together and go to work together because women are working there. You just don't do as much stuff together as what you used to. So getting into something where it's like physical activity for men can be helpful, and group camaraderie, so something where there's a lot of men there doing the same thing, can be helpful. Yeah. Fisher's saying addiction equals weak mind. I would say absolutely not, because a large portion of people who have addiction actually have struggled with a lot of trauma when they were younger. So it's not guaranteed that if you have trauma, you have addiction, but research really strongly shows that if you have addiction, you're more likely to have had trauma. So in terms of a weak mind, if you're surviving trauma and you're still going on to live another day, even with addiction, I would say that's quite a strong mind, and actually quite a resourceful mind, because you're leaning on something to protect yourself. So I'd actually say if you've been through trauma, you're probably a lot more stronger than most. And look, a lot of people in addiction that I know have to be quite tough cookies, because even just being in addiction isn't easy. You've got to have like mad strength just to wake up the next day and keep going. So I'd say the opposite. Yeah. Aaron is saying, can you think of any addictions that are positive? Yeah, there's lots. We all have addiction because addiction's to do with dopamine. So we're supposed to be striving towards things which are pleasurable and which serve a purpose. We're essentially addicted to dopamine. Just drugs and alcohol give you more dopamine than they make you produce more dopamine than what average day stuff will. The thing is, though, we're not supposed to have access to stuff as easy as what we do in the 21st century. So, for instance, like, look at sex addiction. So, like, porn addiction. We're supposed to mate. Like, that's evolution. But it's not supposed to be that easy. It's not supposed to be at your fingertips, do you know what I mean? So, it's like, the thing is, addictions are healthy. It's just the amount that we do the thing. So the excessiveness and the things that we're doing aren't healthy. So I would say if you can have a few vices which are healthy for you and not get too stuck in one, that's going to be healthy. So eating well, doing some kind of healthy exercise, having hobbies and interests, stuff like that. Having a full life where you've got a lot of vices. So music, Muscles Malone, Music Malone, for God's sake. So bad at reading these names. Muscles Malone, my uncle has been smoking meth since I was born, way back in the 1990s. He's still alive and living at 53. Yeah, I know loads of people I know somebody who is taking the heroin and God knows what else and still going. So yeah, that some people, it is the thing with addiction is it's Russian roulette that you're playing with, isn't it? Like you just don't know. I had somebody who had struggled with alcohol, so my next door neighbour, and then got sober and 6 years later ended up dying of a stroke. Like that is the thing, we just don't know. And I think this is the thing that we need to think about is like with addiction recovery, we say tomorrow, but actually we don't know if tomorrow's even gonna come. So like it is important to start strategizing toward, okay, what do I need to do to get sober or stop the addiction? And maybe that is just doing, maybe it's not just getting some tools under your belt, but looking at why do I have the addiction in the first place and starting there. Papa's saying, I enjoy living off grid, appreciate silence and nature and in my own time. I love that. I don't live fully off grid, but I have moved to a little tiny village in the countryside. I love it. Me and my friends have just got an allotment together. We're about to get some chickens. We found a place which you can get like old battery hens. So we're going to get some chickens and so I love it though. Do love it. Were I on Dragon's Den? Dragon's Den? No, I've never been on Dragon's Den. My certificates are just my degrees. So I've got a foundation degree and then a degree because I've got 2 degrees in counselling and my masters. And I was studying my PhD in addiction in psychology, but I ended up leaving after 2 years because I was a single mummy. Right, let's see. Is it cold in Newcastle? Yeah, it's been snowing today. Very cold, actually. Patiently happy. I love that, patiently happy. I think you're going to be more happy if you're patient as well, I would imagine. I worked at a restaurant and when... Oh, I don't want to read that. Anyways, has anyone got any questions on addiction or mental health? Because I'm a therapist and I'm happy to answer them. And yeah, let's see what other people are saying though. I'm going to scroll around. So Fish is saying a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, it can be helpful to know which direction we're walking instead of just taking steps. But yeah, it is. It's just one step. And the thing with anything in mental health, so as a therapist, they need to be small, bite-sized, actionable goals. So it needs to be something that you can take action on straight away, and they need to be bite-sized, like something really small, because we can end up putting it off. And that's the thing, we put off addiction recovery because we're like, this is going to be awful, like it's going to be brutal. But if we could start to say, okay, what one step can I do toward my recovery, whatever that might be, learning how to tackle a craving. Like we don't even need to stop. We could just practice by putting ourselves in a position where we're having a craving and say, I'm not going to do the thing for half an hour, or I'm not going to do the thing for an hour, and just see what it's like to have a craving and get through it and be like, actually, that's not as bad as I thought. So yeah, just one little step towards it. Let's see what else. Fish, you're making a conscious decision to take part in the addiction. I'm not saying life can't be fun, but when the habits are no longer serving you more positively than negatively and you continue on. Yeah, this is the thing. Like, I think on paper, I fully agree. I think, you know, it does get to a point where, look, let's be real. Addiction's always fun in the beginning. We don't do something that we hate. If you're addicted to smoking weed, you're not sitting there hating smoking weed. Like, I was addicted to cat. I used to love it. It was, I used to have a blast on it. It was great until it wasn't. And then it did start becoming more negative. But the problem with it then was I didn't have things outside of the addiction. So I didn't have a life outside of the addiction. So first of all, I had to build a life up outside of the addiction. And I did that before I got sober. So I started learning, like, what am I interested in? I started getting hobbies and interests. And also my life was, looking back, no wonders why I was struggling in addiction. It wasn't great. It was pretty awful. And also all my friends were also getting wrecked. So I had a lot of friendships which were built on a buzz. So I agree with, you need to stop, but it's not as simple as just stopping. It really isn't. And I think it's about preparing your life to stop by creating a life which is in alignment with somebody who isn't addicted to the thing. And then learning little hacks. I think the more you learn about the neuroscience behind addiction, the more little hacks you'll be able to get, because basically you've got to outsmart your brain. If you understand what's going on in your brain, then you can start to use that as a roadmap on how to do differently. So learning about where's the addiction came from, learning about the neuroscience, learning about the biology, and then flipping it on its head. So Wesley, Kate, hello. I'm sure I've seen you on here before. There's definitely been a Wesley on. Hello anyways. Can I ask you a few questions? Of course, fire away. So Dusty's saying coming off them was really hard. Withdrawals lasted for months, it felt like. Yeah, and this is normal. I think, so for me, my addiction, I don't know if you're talking about what addiction you had. Mine was a psychological addiction, and cravings were pretty brutal, I think, for the first 3 months. But they do start to get easier. I think, so this is where having, like, preparing for that. So I don't ever want to sit here and say addiction recovery is really easy. It's not. But being aware, okay, this is going to be really difficult. Like, what can I put in place to support myself in those difficult times and those moments of weakness, or those hellish withdrawals can be helpful. So this is where having accountability can help. So somebody who knows that you're going through addiction recovery, whether that's through groups or just like someone that you trust, so you can phone them up and say, I'm really struggling at the moment. And that's just by doing that, you're thinking rationally about the situation, which actually brings online the part of your brain which is responsible for impulse control. So that can be really helpful. And also it's just that extra support to lean on when you're struggling. Right, my father is 19, he still drinks every day. The other day told me that he has an added glass of water, do you mean? He has an added glass of water over 35 years. Do you mean he hasn't had a glass of water in 35 years? Oh, Dusty's saying tramadol. Yeah. See, this is the thing when we're taking prescription drugs, you can have, they can be, a lot of them can be chemically addictive as well. So I had to go through physical withdrawal of quetiapine, which I was prescribed, and it was brutal. And there's a lot of people taking opiates at the moment, and Subonox, and yeah, so I can imagine that was really difficult for you as well, because you're not only dealing with a psychological addiction but also a chemical addiction. Elijah saying, what is a psychological addiction? Yeah, so you have 2 types of addiction. So you've got, and you can have, but with 3 types, because you'd have both. So you can have a psychological addiction, which means that you mentally rely on it. So you're not physically dependent on it. So you're still dependent on it. It still changes your brain chemistry. It's still a mammoth task to tackle. But you also then have a physical addiction, and that's where your body is reliant on it. And this is where you have physical withdrawals. So for me, quetiapine, I spoke about that. So I wasn't psychologically addicted to it because I didn't get a buzz off it, but I was physically dependent on it. And that meant when I removed it, I was like rattling, and it's physical feelings. So you get hot and cold sweats, your bones kind of feel like they're hurting a bit and aching. There's loads of really horrible things that you feel like you've got cold and flu type symptoms, shakes. So that's what they call a rattle. You'll hear people say that with heroin addiction. And then you get some addictions which are both psychological and physical, and that's like heroin, benzocaines and stuff like that. So that's where you're getting a buzz off it, so you feel like you need it because you enjoy it, but you've also chemically addictive, and that's one of the hardest things to get off. So alcohol is also physically and psychologically addictive. And the thing with things which are physically addictive, you have to be careful because they can be more dangerous to come off because your body can go into shock. So they can be fatal. So alcohol addiction, we had someone who said that their dad's been drinking alcohol, they're now 90. If he was to come off addiction and off alcohol tomorrow and just stop and go cold turkey, that could be really dangerous and actually could be fatal. So it's really important that we're using healthcare professionals, or at the very least, if that's something you really don't want to do, researching whatever you're taking and learning how to come off it safely. Dusty, what was also really hard was wrapping weed in. I'd been using that for 40 years, 4 months off weed now. Mental health is loads better. Nice to hear a local twang hinny. I like that. My grandpa used to say I'm Candyman Hinny to us every time I seen him. Sand dancer now. I actually was a sand dancer. I used to go to move to South Shields in year 7. So yeah. It's a bit mad, isn't it, South Shields? Like on the edge of England, just like a bit crazy. I used to live at Chai. So yeah, weed is really hard to get off. I think a lot of people downplay weed, and I think it's because it's so socially acceptable. A lot of people smoke weed and they're like, it's fine, but actually it's incredibly addictive. And I'm not here to sit here and say don't smoke weed. Really not. I don't care what you're up to. That's up to you. No judgment here. But it is really hard, and a lot of people don't realise that. Now, one of the things that you can do with weed, because we've just been talking about psychological addiction and physical addiction, is smoking weed often is both. And we don't think about that. But what you're actually doing is a lot of people, the majority of people, smoke weed with tobacco. So you've got nicotine, which is physically addictive. So one of the things you can do is remove the nicotine first. So that might look like just having blunts, obviously trying to have less of it, or smoking a little pipe or something. So you can start to do that first, and it's not going to be as bad to get off. But it's still really hard. Any addiction is. And the thing with weed, a lot of people have smoked it since they were kids. Like, you're not the only person who smoked weed for 40 years. Like, a lot of people start smoking weed when they're 13. I did. I think I was 12 or 13 when I had my first joint. No, actually, the first drug I ever took was tack in South Shields, actually. And it was with my friends, and I didn't know what to do with it. We just stood at a street corner and we just chewed it, and it was stuck in my teeth and did absolutely nothing. It was just the worst thing in the world. But yeah, that was at 12, and I think I probably had my first joint at 13. So yeah. Smoking weed with a cigarette filter can help you get off it. There we go. That is another way to do it. I don't even know what that is. Is that those little machines that you put things in? I don't know what a cigarette filter is. Or do you just mean putting a filter in the joint? But yeah, guys, anybody else got any tips for getting off weed, where you can start to get rid of different things that they've done, or any addiction for anyone listening? Weed is not addictive. Heroin and opiates are. Yeah, so see through the veil. So this is, again, what I said before. So you've got psychological addictions and you've got physical addictions. So if you're mixing weed with tobacco, it is physically addictive. It's the tobacco. So you can remove, so you'll start to crave it. But, you know, often people smoke as well. So, but if you don't, it will be. And also, it's psychologically addictive. So I imagine when somebody's sitting there saying, I've got people in my life who says weed isn't addictive, But I imagine if you turned around and said you're never allowed to joint again, or you're never allowed to have a pipe again, or whatever way you have your weed, I bet you would freak out a little bit. I guarantee, because weed is addictive. It's psychologically addictive. And like I say, a lot of people are having it when they're grown up as well. So your brain is developing while smoking weed. So, and also I've seen people really struggle in weed addiction. So yeah. Weed, it does say weed is psychological addictive. It's hard habit to break. A straight blunt for donkey. Do you mean smoked blunts for donkeys? Yeah, it is look, I know people who really, really struggled with weed addiction. I know people whose relationships have broken down. I know people who have really struggled with paranoia and they didn't realise they had schizophrenia, like paranoia, schizophrenia underneath, and they still couldn't stop. Like, weed can be bad. Now, I'm not sitting here saying, like, trying to demonize weed, because I also know people who've quit heroin addictions and smoke weed, or who've had extreme coke and alcohol addiction and now gets prescribed weed and it's changed their life. So I don't want to sit here and say, like, I'm sitting here, don't smoke weed, like, do what you want. But it can be, for people who are saying it's not addictive, it is really addictive. And I've seen people who've really it's ruined their lives. So yeah, and I've seen people really struggling to get off it. So I beg to differ, guys. So what are your thoughts on doom scrolling and phone addiction? Yeah, so I've struggled with that. I've managed to get to quite a healthy place with it. And the thing is, it's just dopamine. We're getting dopamine. We don't get as much dopamine as you'll get from drugs and alcohol, or gambling or something like that, or porn, but you still do get little hits of dopamine, especially when you're doing shorts, because it's just constant little hits. And what the thing with that is, if you're flooding your brain with dopamine, life outside of your phone is going to be pretty bleak, because you're not going to get the same amount. So anything that we do where we're repeatedly flooding our brains with dopamine is going to change our brain chemistry. So what that means is we get dopamine from a lot of things, from like food, from connection, just loads of different things. So if we start flooding our brains with dopamine, it changes the dopamine receptors. It like down regulates the amount of dopamine we get from stuff. So the average stuff that we would normally get enjoyment from, if we didn't have the addiction, no longer feel enjoyable. And that's why life feels flat. So I would say it's harmful, but it's also difficult because everybody's got a bloody phone attached to them. So yeah. And what I did is I started having a time allocated for my phone addiction and started trying to replace it with something that was nourishing. So podcasts or journaling. I mean, I know journaling's probably not that enjoyable to other people, but I do genuinely enjoy it. But just doing things that I enjoy. So yeah. See through the veil. Weed is a depressing drug. I was a heroin addict for 20 years and that was hard to stop, same as methadone. Yeah, I mean, look, I cannot imagine how difficult that was, see through the veil. Like, my best friend did it, and I've never, honestly, I've never seen anyone closer to being what I describe as a warrior. Like, she was just dropping her methadone and she was doing it every 2 weeks, and she was just on her knees and seeing her pick herself up to do the next drop when she had barely got over the last drop in methadone. And so for people who don't know about methadone, it's a substitute for heroin, which I think a lot of people do know. But what you do is you'll start off with a certain amount of milligrams. See through the veil, do you know how many is it 100? I don't know, but basically you drop it, and each time you drop, it gets harder and harder and harder. So by the time you get to the end of it, it's actually harder than when you first start dropping in the beginning. Yeah. So yeah, hats off to you for being able to do that. I know a lot of people who've said that actually getting off methadone's harder than heroin. That it's just as tough. Namrafin, how do you think addiction can be prevented before it starts? Yeah, I did my dissertation on that actually for my first degree. I watched a TED talk who said it's due to lack of connection with others, as we as humans need community and sense of belonging. What do you think? So that TED talks is by Johan Hari, and it's a brilliant TED talk. So I actually did my dissertation for my master's on it, and he actually let us interview him, which was really cool. So yeah, what he talks about is absolutely right, and it's really backed with research that we are disconnected from people. And actually, one of the things that I think where groups shine, so NA, AA groups, smart groups, is you actually start to connect with people, and you're also starting to connect with people who've been through what you've been through. So that actually makes you produce vasopressin, especially if you're a man. You produce vasopressin, which is like the bonding hormone, because you've been through group camaraderie. So yeah, I think to flip that on its head, to prevent, I absolutely do agree that if you have connection, you're going to be living a more fulfilled life and you're less likely to have addiction. The thing is though, if your only connection is people who are doing the thing, then obviously I would argue that we need to create new connections in our life, because like, let's be real, a lot of people who struggle with addiction, especially alcohol or drugs, are also with a lot of friends who also do the same alcohol and drugs. In terms of preventing, one, don't let it become a habit. So think of 60-40 rules. So if you want to drink and go out with, say, have a social drink with your friends, 60% of the time don't drink, 40% do drink. So you're less likely to create a habit around it. And the main thing is to work on your mental wellness, because addiction recovery is self-medication. So you're either self-medicating, undiagnosed mental health disorders, physical chronic pain, and or childhood trauma or trauma in later life. So I would work on making sure that you've got mental resilience. Learning about yourself and your triggers and how to manage them would also prevent addiction. So if for me, for my child, I've got a 4-year-old, I know for a fact that he's probably going to try a drug in his life, because research talks about how it's called the normalization theory. It's very normal for children to take drugs. I mean, I don't personally know a millennial who hasn't tried a drug, or, do you know what I mean? At the very least, alcohol. So one thing that I need to do, instead of thinking about, let's not scare him off drugs, let's try and build his mental resilience so he knows how to cope with stress and he knows how to handle his emotions. And that's going to make him better and more resilient against drug addiction. And to flip that on people who struggle with addiction, we can also do that now. Learn mental resilience. See through the veil. Alcohol is the worst drug. Yeah, I agree. I actually do agree with that. I'm honestly struggling. I drink 3 times 9% cans a day, feel absolutely crap in the morning. See through the veil. If you want to have a one-to-one and join my addiction recovery group that's starting next week, hopefully, go on my website. And anybody else who wants some support, I'm giving out free support. Just go on schoolofaddiction.co.uk and I'll get in touch with you. But yeah, alcohol is the worst, and it's because it's so socially acceptable. Like, I get just as weird looks from people when I say that, like, you know, if I'm getting in a taxi or something, and they say, like, so I get picked up from outside a pub and they're like, if you're having a drink, and I'm like, oh, I don't drink. And they like give us a weird look, and it's just as much of a weird look or comment that I got as when I used to say, like, as if I was to say I used to be addicted to ketamine. It's like, you what? You don't drink? So it's really difficult because it's so ingrained in society, alcohol. And actually it is psychologically and physically addictive as well. And also it can be fatal to stop. So we have to reduce it down, and preferably with a service. But yeah, it is really hard. And like, I've struggled to stop drinking alcohol and I didn't even have an addiction to it, let alone if you do. So PNW saying, I'm an alcoholic, started drinking young. When I turned 21, I started heavy drinking. Slowed down when I was 22. You haven't said who died, but someone died in 23, and I've been drinking daily ever since. I'll be 26 this year. Yeah, and that makes absolute sense, that you've started drinking every day. And look, PNW, I don't want to give you support over a screen, but if you want a free one-to-one, just you can send us a message, and I'm going to be booking some in later on today for this week if you'd like that. Yeah, but it's understandable. So your dad died in 23. Yeah, it's understandable that you've started drinking again, because it sounds like it was something you're already doing, and then you've had a huge trauma, and our brains, it's really hard for our brain to deal with something like that. Like, I couldn't comprehend going through that. So it's understandable that you've then lent into something that was already a bit of a crutch before that. And I think one thing is, like, first of all, understand, like, cutting yourself some slack. Like, it's understandable that I've got an alcohol addiction, because look what I've been through. Like, that, and first of all, cutting yourself some slack and giving yourself some grace for why you are where you are, and then slowly but surely getting you to another place. And I'm happy to hash that out with you. OP is saying meth and heroin is the worst. Yeah, so I think alcohol, so if you look at it, so someone called David Nutt in the UK is categorised substances from most harmful to least harmful, and he has put heroin at the top. I'm pretty sure it's heroin then cocaine. I think it's in that order. It might be cocaine then heroin, but I'm pretty sure it's heroin then cocaine. Because heroin's, yeah, it will be, because heroin's physically addictive as well. And then he's put alcohol. I think alcohol is number 4, and then smoking's number 6. I think I need to check that out again, to be honest. It's been a while since I've looked at it. I would argue that heroin and alcohol go hand in hand. So he's done it on a few different reasons why that's the order. But the thing is, so with heroin, you can remove yourself from heroin easier than you can remove yourself from alcohol. So, like, that's like physically. So alcohol, I would say quite a lot of people, a high percentage of people drink alcohol socially, whereas not a high amount of people do heroin. So for me, when I was a ketamine addict, I can always get a hold of ketamine, but I can also, when I became clean of it, remove myself from people and places where ketamine would be. So it was less triggers. Obviously heroin, I would say, it is a much harder addiction to come off. So it's a harder thing to get off. But alcohol it can be fatal. So you can't die off withdrawals from heroin, but you can off alcohol. So yeah, I think there's a lot of arguments for which one's worse. And I'm just going to end it on, they are both fucking brutal. They are brutal. And I think that sometimes we downplay how brutal it is. Right, this feels weird talking about this, because I'm a closet alcoholic, and I've never told anyone until just now. I'm so happy you did say something. I was a functioning addict, and I didn't tell anyone until the day that I stopped. But I think just talking, like I was talking in the beginning about addiction recovery is taking steps toward recovery. And that doesn't need to be stopping the alcohol. It needs to be, okay, what am I going to do toward stopping the alcohol, and praising yourself along the way. And that's huge, PNW. Like, saying it out loud is a huge part of your recovery. So recovery starts now, and you've just started it. So that's absolutely mint. And then the next might be planning it out. Like, what is that going to look like? What things might you do to prepare yourself for it? So it doesn't need to be, I'm stopping today. It can be, okay, I'm getting myself ready to stop, and praising yourself for every step toward that. But yeah, I'm really glad you said that you, 1, felt comfortable to say it, and 2, that you have. See Through the Veil, PNW, link with me. I don't go out, I'm functioning. But well done for admitting it. Yeah, and I think this, look, both of you can link with me as well. Absolutely. We can set, both of you join me group if you want. So again, you don't need to stop, you can just join the group. So my addiction group I'm doing is all on, one, it's going to give you strategies, but it's all about building mental resilience, so you're in the right headspace to, one, stop the addiction if you need to stop, but two, to maintain recovery. Talking about it makes this real, and to be honest, I don't like it because I've always told myself it wasn't a problem. It really is. I had lawn care business, but due to alcohol, it never succeeded. The thing is, PNW, like, you don't need to do any more than just what you've done now. Like, saying it out loud, like, process that. And I think I saw, like, it's one of those things where, you know, that is a big step, so I don't want to push you into more. So, like, you've said it out loud, process it, and that is the first step to change. And there's a full model. So I've studied addiction. There's this full model on this. It's called the addiction wheel of change. And the first part is denial. So it's very normal to sit in denial, and then you start to get ambivalent is the next step. And that's where you start here change talk. So it's like, okay, I'm not in denial anymore. So this is part of the process. And I think just praising yourself for taking that first step. And it probably does feel a lot. You've just went from denial to real, and you don't need to move to the next step yet. Just sit with it. I think that's like, sit where you are now for a little bit and say and praise yourself for it. And also recognize that you're saying you didn't succeed because of that alcohol, but actually the alcohol was serving a purpose because you've been through a fucking hell of a lot. So I think cutting yourself some slack is a really good next step. Is processing and cutting yourself slack. Papa's saying alcoholics, not much difference. People on meth's trouble. What do you mean alcoholics, not much difference? The thing with alcohol is it can really change who we are as a person. So there's a lot of people who then become abusive on alcohol, and I've seen that. So it brings out a side of them which isn't truly them. So yeah, you can say people are meth of trouble. I think I was probably a bit of trouble when I was addicted to ketamine, to be honest with you. What's my name? See Through the Veil. I'm called Ashley. I'm ready. I'm really addicted to laziness. What should I do? Well, I don't think it's laziness. I don't think anyone's lazy. I think usually there's something going on underneath it. So it might be that we're procrastinating, like it might be that we're depressed. It might be that we're using we're flooding ourselves with dopamine, like through doom scrolling. So we're on a bit of a come down off that when we're not doom scrolling. Can be a lot of things. So it's with anything, it's worth working out what's going on. Why am I quote unquote lazy? Because you won't be lazy, you'll just not have energy. Maybe it's just that your life is that pretty shit and I can't be asked to get up and participate in it. You know, it's never just as simple as I'm lazy. Oh, we'll go saying show love for Ashley with hearts. Yes, please. And subscribe if you don't mind subscribing. It's super free and easy. And it means I can help other people for free as well, because if I can get paid off YouTube, it means I can help as many people as possible for free, which would be the ideal. Ashley, I've subscribed and I'm 100% up for your groups or one-to-one talk, and you can have both of them. See Through the Veil. If you go on my website, anybody who's interested, who needs some support, because I do recognise it's not ethical supporting people by answering questions through a screen. So if anyone's in dire straits and needs some support, it's free of charge. I am qualified, although it's not counselling. I'll be doing just a plan and then a group. But go on my website, schoolofaddiction.co.uk. And even if you just want to send a question, if I've missed one of your comments, I will pick them up and answer. I will say that it takes us a few days to get around. I need to be in the right frame of mind to reply to people. So yeah, don't freak out if it's a couple of days. Leonardo, hello, how are you doing? Your eyes speak, do they? What are they saying? What are they saying? Do I have Facebook? Oh, I do, but I don't go on it. I keep it just because I've got friends from like all over, so I don't know why though. I don't even speak to them on Facebook. I speak to them on like WhatsApp, like a normal person. I just don't like change, really. I've just never got rid of it. Daniel Smart, letting addiction defeat you is a sin. Well, I haven't said this for a while, but I do love this thing. So I watch Matthew McConaughey, Diary of a CEO. He is so fucking inspirational, by the way. If anyone wants to be inspired, watch that. But he was saying about how sin comes from Latin, and it's an archery term, and it means to miss the mark. So I've also seen something else where somebody was like, basically society is sinners judging other sinners. AKA, if you put the two together, we'll all miss the mark, we'll all make mistakes, we'll all fuck up. So yes, it is a sin. We'll have slightly got it wrong. It would have been a bit easier if we didn't have the addiction, let's be real. Maybe that first line or whatever was a poor decision. But let's be real, let's not go around judging people for sinning. Like, we're all sinners. And I actually think it's more dangerous when you've got somebody who sits there thinking that they're not sinning, to think that they're perfect and they're not missing the mark, because that's somebody who's probably struggling with low self-esteem. They've more than definitely not got an accurate view of themselves, so we'll call that incongruence in counselling. And if it's because of our religion, then it probably means that we're restricting ourselves for fear of getting it morally wrong. So yeah. Guys saying, I'm thinking about taking anabolic steroids. Is that a bad idea? Do you mean, is that like steroids as in for the, like, for gains? Or is it a different type of steroids? Because you can have steroids for loads of things. I don't know too much about steroids, Guy, to be honest with you. And I don't want to give out like dodgy advice just for the sake of sounding smart. Like, that is not my forte. But yeah. See through the veil saying, come on, people, give this lady respect she deserves. She doesn't need childish comments. I don't even care. See through the veil. Actually, when people are saying things, even if it like trolls are coming on, it's actually driving me channel out to the people who need it. So they're actually helping. So ask us what is spunk as many times as you want. I'm just not going to reply. For muscle enhance, yeah, I don't know too much about that. Like, I think it's like, there's I would say just research it, Guy. Like, from what I do know about it is it can have negative effects. I do know somebody who takes it, who says he does it, like, it can be dangerous, but if you take it, he does it in cycles, and a lot of people don't do it in cycles, so that would be harm reduction, to make sure that you do. But generally it's not good, but I don't know enough about it, to be honest with you. And I think it's always, if you're going to do something, at least walk into it knowing your shit. So I'd say do your research, Guy. And then at least you're making an informed decision. Do you know what I mean? Instead of just listening to like me spout off from like a couple of things I've stumbled across. Like, do your research. And don't be afraid to look at the negatives as well as the positives. 2 years and 5 months sober, still take every day as it comes. Love your positivity. Thank you. That is some shift. And actually, after your 2 years, the majority of people's brains are fully rewired. So you're in a good spot. What would you say, D3, then, that is your top tip to support people who are listening who are struggling in an active addiction? If you don't mind sharing, that is. And anybody else who's listening, like, what would you say to people who are struggling? I'm nearly in my 4 years clean, actually. So next month, on the 3rd of February, I'll be 4 years clean off ket. So that is going to be fun. I honestly at one point couldn't even make it to 6 p.m. the next day. So who'd have thought? Let's see. Am I Scottish? No, I'm not from Scotland. I'm from Newcastle. Why did I have to think about that? That is a sign that I need to stop this live because I couldn't even think about what my accent is there. See through the veil. Steroids enlarge your heart. There's many different anabolic steroids. Yeah. See, this is the thing. Like, I know that it's not good for you. I don't know why it's not. And then it's worth looking into it and then making that decision. And also looking at like different alternatives. So what can you do differently? Are there things like creatine and stuff like that? So I take creatine gummies, which I need to remind myself to buy some more of actually. So just like looking at different alternatives and just weighing things up. I don't ever want to sit here and say don't do something, because ultimately I don't think somebody telling you not to do something's really helpful. But I do think researching and making an informed decision is helpful. And then at the very least, do harm reduction. I think that's more important to say, is like reducing harm. The world knows the UK is falling apart internally. Oh, I mean, yeah, it's very woke, isn't it? I don't even say anything about it because, well, it's so woke. But I've got to say, I do love living in the UK. Like, it's quite funny because like I'll be watching things like Joe Rogan and he'll be like going, oh my God, the UK is crazy. And I've always thought, oh my God, I would hate to live in the States. I think that's crazy. So there's like, yeah. I think the world is a bit crazy, let's be real. Creatine makes me sick. I've tried that before. Yeah, I don't know, Guy. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't want to start giving advice on fitness and stuff, and that's just not my forte. But See Through the Veil seems to know a bit more about it. Does anybody else know? Can anybody help a guy out? See what I did there? Help a guy out. Yep. Anybody who knows about creatine and alternatives, sorry, not creatine, steroids and alternatives for gains. Would switching rum for DMT count as harm reduction? So I would always say that it's harm reduction. So I know people who've switched like alcohol for weed or heroin and smokes weed, and realistically you need to look at risk versus reward. Like that is going to be much better than like thinking about what's more problematic, and that might be physically and mentally and socially. What's more problematic for you? So if for rum, so you said rum, obviously alcohol can be really intense, alcohol addiction, especially spirit. So I'd say, I mean, as someone who's taken it DMT, I wouldn't say that it's something you could switch it up for. I wouldn't want to be on, well, one, it doesn't last that long. Two, I was throwing up loads because I didn't fast. And three, it's just not ideal to be doing all the time. So I don't know if DMT would be my first choice to switch something up for. Maybe try switch it up for martial arts. Right, England, nasty 4 countries, Ireland, Wales, Scotland, England, lol, nasty. Not enjoying England. To be honest with you, I don't know. I do like it. I've lived abroad before, and I do like, but look, I think we're just conditioned to, we're going to like what we're used to. If I was born in a cage, I'd be like, oh, I don't love me cage. don't like that big bed. I think I prefer my cage. It's a comfort, isn't it? So anyways, I'm getting really tired, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to do one more thing and then go, because my brain's starting to turn to mush. D3 said, I swapped alcohol and coke addiction for gym addiction, have a very much more structured life and similar circle, which helps me nowadays. Yeah, I mean, look, if you can do physical fitness, it is so brilliant. If you're able to, it is so brilliant to swap addiction for, because you get dopamine from it. But the good thing is as well, you have So everybody whatever addiction we have, you need to have like a pain pleasure balance. So what goes up must come down. So for instance, come downs we get hangovers. Hangovers are a bit worse than just a come down, but that's the crash from dopamine. And if you do something which you've got a bit of challenge in it, and it's a bit physically demanding on the body or brain, you're gonna get that at the same time. So things like ice baths, saunas, gym, martial arts, dancing, something where you've got a bit of pain and pleasure mixed in, it's actually great because you don't get that come down. You actually just level out. So it's really good for you in a lot of ways. But yeah, I'm gonna let you go and I'll see you later. And Guy, good luck with your little rabbit hole for whether to take steroids or not. But yeah, I'm gonna go because I can't even speak properly now. And I'll be back tonight at 9 p.m. GMT time, horrible English time. The person who's just been hating on England. And I go live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 a.m, 9 p.m. GMT time. And if I haven't picked up your comment, just go over to my website, schoolofaddiction.co.uk, or if you wanted some free support, again, go to my website. But thanks for everyone who's joined, and if you could give us a subscribe, that would be great.